I knew my family didn't really see me, but nothing prepared me for what my mother said that night. She leaned back in her chair, eyes cold, and told me, "Don't expect anything from us." My brother actually smiled like he'd been waiting to watch me break. I didn't. I stayed completely still even as the room tightened around me. Something in the silence felt different, like someone else had finally heard enough. And just when Mom thought she'd won a chair scraped behind her slow deliberate, that was the moment everything shifted, though none of them realized it yet. My name is Rebecca, and for most of my life I thought staying quiet was the safest way to survive my own family. I grew up in a small house in Seattle where the walls were thin, the expectations were heavy, and the affection felt rationed. Mom used to say she treated us equally, but even as a kid, I could see the tilt in the scales. My brother Daniel got the bigger slices of cake, the newer shoes, the louder praise. I got what was left after the dust settled. I learned early not to ask for much. When Daniel wanted something, a school trip, a new jacket, Mom made it happen no matter the cost. When I needed help with college applications or a ride to my part-time job, the answer was usually, "You're old enough to figure it out." So I did. I worked late shifts, saved every dollar, and told myself that independence was a badge of honor, not a sentence. Grandpa was the single exception. He was steady, patient, and never made me feel like loving me was a chore. His place always smelled like pine and old books, and every time I visited, he'd smile and say, "You look tired, sweetheart. Sit. Tell me everything." I didn't tell him everything, of course, but he listened to the pieces I was brave enough to share. As I got older, the favoritism didn't fade. It sharpened. Mom spoke about Daniel like he was the sun we all orbited. She covered his unpaid bills, co-signed. His leases, bought him out of problems he created. I kept my distance working in office administration downtown, keeping my head down, living small because I never wanted to need anything from them. But the imbalance grew impossible to ignore. Little comments piled up, jokes about how Daniel was the one who'd carry the family name, hints that I should step aside when decisions were made. Even during holidays, I felt like furniture present, useful but unnoticed. Still, I kept showing up. That's what you do when you hope a family might one day choose you back. When Grandpa invited us all to a winter dinner at Mom's house, I thought it was just another holiday gathering. He'd been tired lately, moving slower, relying on me more for doctor visits and errands. I assumed he just wanted us all in one place to feel close again. But when I walked into the dining room that evening, something in the air felt heavy, like everyone already knew a script I hadn't been handed. I just didn't realize the lines they were about to deliver would change everything. By the time dinner started, the tension in the room felt thick enough to chew. Mom moved around the table with the confidence of someone who believed she already owned the night. Daniel lounged back in his chair, scrolling on his phone, barely acknowledging anyone. Grandpa sat quietly at the end of the table, hands folded, eyes sharper than they looked a moment earlier. I took my seat near him, the only place that ever felt remotely safe. Small talk died quickly. Mom brought out the food set, the dishes down a little too forcefully, then cleared her throat like she was preparing for a speech she'd rehearsed. I felt my stomach tighten. She had that expression, the one she wore before delivering a decision she expected everyone else to accept without question. So she began picking up her glass. "I think it's time we talk about the future of this family." Daniel straightened up, suddenly interested. Grandpa didn't move. I stayed quiet. Mom launched into a long explanation about responsibility and keeping things in order, words she liked to use when she really meant control. She talked about the house finances, long-term decisions, all while Daniel nodded like a politician, pretending to understand a bill he didn't read. Then she looked directly at me. "Rebecca," she said, sounding almost bored, "we've agreed that your brother will take care of everything moving forward." I blinked. Everything I repeated, keeping my voice even. She shrugged. "He's the more stable one, more committed to the family. So yes." Daniel smirked, the corner of his mouth lifting like a kid who'd just been handed someone else's birthday present. I felt the humiliation burn low in my chest, but I kept my expression still. He liked when I reacted. Mom liked it even more. I folded my hands on the table. "And me?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Mom didn't hesitate. "Don't expect anything from us." Just like that. Cold. final, delivered with the same tone someone might use to say, "Pass the salt." It was the kind of sentence that didn't echo, it stabbed. The room went painfully quiet. Daniel leaned back, satisfied. Mom adjusted her napkin like she'd just completed an item on her to-do list. And me, I sat there feeling the familiar weight press into my ribs. I'd heard 1,000 subtle versions of that message my entire life. But hearing it out loud, formal public, felt like being erased in real time. I inhaled through my nose, slow and steady. I stayed calm. Calm in a way that didn't feel like defeat anymore. Calm like clarity. Calm like something in me finally clicking into place. I glanced at Grandpa, expecting sympathy. What I saw instead was something else entirely. Recognition, focus, and a quiet, simmering disappointment not directed at me. He shifted in his seat just slightly, but enough for me to realize he wasn't going to let this slide. And without knowing it, Mom had just crossed the one line that would cost her everything. The rest of the dinner went on like nothing had happened, at least for them. Mom kept talking about Daniel's plans. Daniel kept bragging about things he hadn't achieved, and I sat there letting their voices melt into meaningless noise. But underneath that stillness, something in me was shifting quietly, steadily, like the slow crack of ice in deep water. When I excused myself to help clear the dishes, Mom followed me into the kitchen. She didn't come to apologize. She came to reinforce her decision. "You're not upset, are you?" she asked, slicing into the question with false concern. "I mean, you're independent. You always take care of yourself." There it was again, that same twisted praise that meant, "You don't matter as much." I dried my hands on a towel. "I heard what you said." She looked relieved, as if I had finally accepted my place. "Good, it's better for everyone this way." Everyone. Meaning her, meaning Daniel. Never me. Behind her, Daniel leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching like a spectator at a show he thought already had its ending. "It's not personal, Rebecca," he said. "It's just obvious. You don't need anything." I met his eyes for the first time that night. "Maybe I don't," I said softly. He frowned, confused by my lack of fight. Mom waved her hand dismissively and headed back toward the dining room. "Let's finish dessert," she said. "Dad wants to talk before he leaves." Grandpa, the only name in this house that didn't make my shoulders tense. I re-entered the room and found him sitting exactly where I left him, but now he was watching me with an intensity that made my pulse hitch. It wasn't pity, it wasn't shock. It was something quieter, deeper, a decision forming. He reached toward his pocket, then stopped when Mom and Daniel returned. His hand rested on the table instead, fingers tapping lightly, a habit he had whenever he was thinking through something serious. Mom sat next to him and patted his arm, using the sweet tone she reserved for moments when she wanted him to agree with her. "Dad, we were just discussing how Daniel should take over everything. It's time we make things official." Daniel straightened up proudly. Grandpa's tapping stopped. He lifted his gaze to Mom. "Is that so?" She didn't notice the shift in his voice. She kept smiling. "Yes, Rebecca understands. She knows she doesn't need anything from us." My breath caught. So did the tapping. Grandpa drew in a slow breath, eyes darkening, not with age, but with realization. I felt the room tilt almost imperceptibly. Something was coming, something neither Mom nor Daniel saw in the distance. As the conversation moved on, I saw Grandpa's hand drift subtly back toward his pocket, toward the envelope he'd almost pulled out earlier. His jaw tightened. His shoulders straightened. And for the first time that evening, Mom's confidence flickered just barely, like a candle catching a draft. She didn't know it, but the ground beneath her was already starting to split. And all she had done was give him one more reason to let it. Grandpa didn't speak right away. He just sat there, eyes fixed on Mom in a way that made the room feel smaller, tighter. The tapping from earlier had stopped, completely replaced by a stillness that felt heavier than any raised voice could have been. I knew that stillness. It was the same one he carried at the hospital when a doctor was about to deliver hard news. It meant he was done listening. Mom didn't notice. She poured herself more tea, humming like the night was going exactly how she planned. "Dad, we should finalize things tonight," she said. "Daniel and I have talked it through. Everything will run smoother once the paperwork is updated. The house, the savings, the accounts. It's time Daniel takes charge." Daniel puffed up in his seat. I'll make sure everything's handled. Grandpa's voice came out low. Handled? Daniel grinned. Yeah. Grandpa leaned back slightly, studying him. And Rebecca? He asked, tone deceptively casual. Mom exhaled, annoyed. Dad, we've been through this. Rebecca doesn't need anything from the family. She's always been independent. She knows that. She turned to me, expecting agreement. Right, I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was afraid any response would shatter the delicate tension in the room. Something inside me warned that this moment wasn't about my voice. It was about Grandpa's. He placed both hands on the table and cleared his throat. The subtle scrape of his chair against the floor made Daniel pause mid-smirk. I think Grandpa said slowly, "It's time I speak." Mom forced a smile. Of course, Dad. Go ahead. We know this is emotional for you. Grandpa's jaw flexed. You have no idea how emotional. The room snapped into silence. He reached into his coat pocket and took out a thick envelope, cream-colored, sealed, worn at the edges, like it had been handled many times before. He set it on the table with a quiet thud, but it sounded louder than anything else had all night. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What's that? Grandpa looked at me first long enough for my throat to tighten, then turned to them. That he said is the truth. Mom's smile faltered just a little. Dad, what are you talking about? Grandpa slid the envelope toward the center of the table. Before we discuss any paperwork updates, I think it's time you two stop pretending you've earned control over anything. Daniel scoffed. Come on, Grandpa, sit. Grandpa snapped. Daniel sank back down. Grandpa opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers, documents, bank statements, savings records. Not detailed files, just simple proof. Enough to make the blood drain from Mom's face the moment she recognized them. I've spent the last year reviewing everything Grandpa said. Every payment I made. Every dollar I sent to support my granddaughter. He looked straight at Mom. And everything you took. Mom's hand twitched. Dad, that's not don't. His voice struck like a hammer. You told me Rebecca never cashed the support I sent her for school. You told me she refused the help, that she said she didn't want my money. Daniel sat up straighter, suddenly unsure. Grandpa continued, voice steady and merciless. You said Rebecca didn't care, that she wanted nothing to do with what I gave her. But here, he held up a statement, is every deposit I made. And here another sheet is every transfer you made to Daniel with that money. Daniel's mouth fell open. What, Mom? What is he talking about? Mom went pale. Dad, wait. I can explain. There's no explanation. He pointed at the papers. You stole from your own daughter. My stomach dropped. I knew Mom favored Daniel. I knew she'd hidden things. But I didn't know it was this. Grandpa turned to me and his expression softened just a fraction. You were supposed to have enough to finish college comfortably. I gave you enough for books, housing, food. Yet you worked double shifts. You skipped meals. His voice wavered. You thought you were a burden. I swallowed hard. I didn't know I whispered. She never told me. He nodded, eyes dark with pain. I know you didn't. Daniel shot to his feet. Mom, you said, sit down. Grandpa repeated louder this time. Daniel obeyed instantly. Grandpa pushed himself to standing, steadying on his cane. The room froze. Even the air felt afraid to move. Earlier, he said, looking at Mom, you told Rebecca not to expect anything from you. Mom's lips parted. Dad, I didn't mean... He raised a hand. Good. The word hung in the air like a blade. Good. He repeated, voice rising with the kind of authority that made the walls seem to vibrate. Because everything now goes to her. Mom's face collapsed like someone had dropped a stone on her chest, and the shock rippled outward. Dad, no, you can't. Daniel sputtered. Grandpa, this isn't fair. What about me? What about you? Grandpa turned on him, eyes blazing. Everything I gave you, you wasted. Every chance you squandered. And your mother encouraged it. Daniel's jaw clenched. I didn't know the money was hers, you didn't ask. Grandpa shot back. Because you never cared where it came from. You only cared that it came. Mom grabbed the back of her chair, breathing unevenly. Dad, please, let's talk about this privately. We'll talk about it now, Grandpa said. In front of the family. In front of Rebecca. Because this is not a negotiation. He pulled out a second envelope, thinner, crisp, freshly sealed. This, he said, is my updated will. Mom shook her head violently. Dad, no, Daniel needs to grow up, Grandpa said. And you need to live with the consequences of the choices you made. He set the envelope directly in front of me. My hands trembled as I looked at it, too stunned to touch it. Rebecca, Grandpa said softly, "You have been the only one who showed me kindness without expecting anything in return. You took me to my appointments. You sat with me when I was tired. You visited because you cared, not because you wanted something." He looked at Mom. "And you punished her for it." Mom was crying now, silent panic tears. Grandpa wasn't finished. "I am leaving the house, the savings, and everything else to Rebecca. Effective immediately." Daniel knocked over his chair. "This is insane. Mom, do something." Mom grabbed Grandpa's arm. "Dad, she's manipulating you. She's turning you against us." Grandpa jerked his arm free. "She didn't have to turn me against you. You did that yourselves." I finally found my voice. "Grandpa, why tonight?" He looked at me with a sad smile. "Because I needed to see who you all were when I wasn't speaking. And tonight you showed me." He faced Mom and Daniel one final time. Rebecca stayed calm. "You two showed your true colors." Mom reached out again, desperate. "Dad, please." He stepped back, shaking his head. "You told her not to expect anything from you. Now you can expect nothing from me." The room cracked open. Silence. Shock. Collapse. Mom sank into her chair, shaking. Daniel stared at the floor, stunned, and Grandpa placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "It's over," he said. But none of us, especially Mom, would realize just how true that was until much later. The days after that dinner felt strangely quiet, like the world had shifted a few inches, and everyone was still trying to find their balance. Mom called twice, then 3 times, each message more frantic than the last. I didn't answer. Daniel didn't call at all. I heard from a relative that he'd stormed around the neighborhood complaining that everything had been stolen from him, never once admitting why Grandpa made the decision he did. Grandpa, meanwhile, seemed lighter. I drove him to an appointment in downtown Seattle, and he walked a little straighter, breathed a little easier. When we sat together in the waiting room, he nudged my arm gently. "You did well," he said. "I didn't do anything," I replied. He shook his head. "You stayed decent. That's harder than fighting." Later that week, we met with a lawyer to finalize the paperwork he'd already prepared. There were no dramatic signatures, no grand announcements, just a quiet confirmation that everything Mom and Daniel assumed they controlled no longer belonged to them. Grandpa didn't look triumphant. He looked relieved. When we left the office, the winter air felt sharper, cleaner. We stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching traffic move across the city. "You know, he said being loved shouldn't feel like begging." I swallowed, feeling something loosen in my chest. I guess I kept hoping they'd change. "They won't," he said gently, "but you can choose differently." And for the first time in years, I believed him. Even now, when I think about that night, I don't remember the shock or the shouting first. I remember the moment Grandpa placed his hand on my shoulder, the quiet certainty that I wasn't invisible after all. Losing my family the way I knew them hurt, but gaining the truth set something free inside me. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it stands up slowly, clears its throat, and speaks for you when you're too tired to fight. If this story resonates with you, share your thoughts below and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. You're not alone.